It was eventually discovered that my ex-partners had forged financial documents. Not only did they forge the financial documents, but they also forged Ernst& Young chief auditor's signature on those financial documents. With those forged financial documents, they went to 6 different banks to borrow money from each bank, plus all the money that was injected by all these investors from family offices and whatnot. They emptied the bank account and fled to China, abandoning their wives, partners, children, and families, and leaving us all high and dry.
Oh my gosh, that sounds terrible.
Welcome to Brave. Learn from Southeast Asia's best tech leaders. Build the future, learn from our past, and stay human in between. No BS on success. I'm Jeremy Au, venture capitalist, Sierra founder, Harvard MBA, science fiction nerd, and dad of 2 daughters. Every week, we debate startup news, interview changemakers, answer listener questions, and share personal insights. Join our movement of over 40,000 members and get transcripts, resources, and community at www.bravesea.com. Stay well and stay brave.
Hello, Gerald. I'm really excited to have you on the show. I've been seeing you and hanging out with you the past few years, and I was like, wait a moment, there's a really interesting narrative and story that you've had. So glad to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Could you introduce yourself?
My name is Gerald Tan.
Yeah.
I've been a dental surgeon for the past 22 years. I graduated with a degree in dentistry from the Faculty of Dentistry in NUS. I obtained postgrads in dentistry in England and in Australia, back in Singapore again.
Right.
But what's interesting is I also obtained an executive business education from HBS.
And I think at the Harvard Business School is where we encountered each other.
Yes.
And I was like, okay, you're a dentist then.
That is not common, having a HBS dentist.
Are you the first or?
Yeah, so when I was in school in Boston, I went up to the admin office and spoke to the head of admin. I was curious and asked her whether, according to their records, they had any Singaporean dentists graduate from either the HBS MBA program or
Right.
any of the executive programs. To my pleasant surprise, I'm the first Singaporean dentist to have done,
Oh.
according to them. Yeah.
According to them, you could even be the first Southeast Asian dentist. You should go back and ask.
Many medical doctors who have gone through either MBA program or exec programs, but dentists, not so common.
Yeah, you could be the first Southeast Asian
Maybe.
dentist.
That could be my claim to fame.
We can update that further as well.
could be.
Okay. So I brought you in because there are 3 parts. One is what does it take to become a dentist? 2 is your learnings about dentistry and technology and how it's changing. Thirdly, you've been entrepreneurial and a business operator within the field of dentistry. And I think all 3 are just so fascinating to me as somebody whose grades were never good enough to be a dentist, especially from junior college to get into there. So I'm curious, let's go back to the beginning. Did you know you're going to become a dentist in secondary school or junior college?
I was in Anglo-Chinese school for 12 years. So I'm an ACS boy. I had really good teachers back in secondary school. My favorite teacher at that time was a biology teacher. So she influenced me to consider studying medicine or dentistry. In the end, I applied to NUS for both medicine and dentistry, but for whatever reason, which I still don't know today, I was only offered dentistry. My grades were good enough. You know, now that I'm much older and I've got friends in MOH and all that, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say this, but what the heck. I think the Ministry of Education has some kind of a quota. It's a problem when all the top students go to medicine or law. Singapore needs top students, different fields. I think there's a quota for students from medicine, for dentistry, for law, for architecture, and then they randomly assign top students to these different faculties. I was influenced and got into NUS Dentistry. I grew to love it because I felt that dentistry was uniquely different from medicine in the sense that dentistry is a merger of art, science, and craftsmanship. I'm constantly using my hands to craft something in the mouth, kind of like an engineer or architect in the mouth.
That's so fascinating. So I wanted to unpack that because I always remember that was in junior college, just the A-level results came up and one of my classmates, I won't mention who.
Which JC were you in?
I went to Raffles Junior College. My parents were like, if your grades are good, you should go. So I went. My grades were not very good. Horrible. I think even if my grades had been good, I would have also gone into healthcare actually. But
Yeah.
I always remember that I think there was like, there's this mind pride because her grades were like A2 in something. And so she felt like that wouldn't let her crack the doctor path, which is seen as higher. That's what I remember. And then she's now a dentist. I'm not gonna say who. Did you feel that way? Did you feel disappointed that you were going to dentistry and not a doctor?
I felt that it was a privilege for me
Yeah.
to be offered that
Yeah.
place. It was keenly contested. During my time, there's only 30 spots. There's only one dental faculty in our entire country, and that dental faculty class size was only 30. I was told there were about 900 applicants vying for 30 spots. I went for internships at both medical and dental practices during my JC days. Having had that exposure, I was blessed to have that clarity of mind that either one would be okay. I didn't really see that being a dentist was necessarily any less being a medical doctor, but there's an interesting background story to explain why some people might feel that way. Dentistry maybe 100 years ago was not really considered important part of your overall well-being. It's always your whole systemic health first and then your dental health second. I think maybe even some people of the older generation today also feel that way. And that's why some people feel that dentistry is a discretionary spend.
My
But
grades
things
were
are
nowhere good.
changing. Things are changing.
Well, my grades were nowhere good enough for either one of them. So tell me about the experience. You're a class of 30 people and you're experiencing a mixture of that medical, the science, the art, the craftsmanship, and learning that. What was that like while you're practicing to be a dentist?
So in dental school, year ones, fresh out of JC, we would share the same classes as the medical year ones. The students from the Faculty of Medicine and the students from the Faculty of Dentistry, we shared the same classes in the first year. All the basic science classes, all the biochemistry, physiology, so on and so forth. And then second year onwards, then we branched out. Yeah, and I always found it fascinating. Dentistry is the only body part or organ that broke away from medicine to start its own faculty. I mean, think about it. Our human body has so many different organs. There's the brain, the lungs, the heart, your mouth and teeth, eyes, and reproductive system, skeleton, and your skin. So your teeth and jaw and mouth is the only body part that is so complicated that it broke away from the medical faculty to start its very own faculty.
Right.
And it's a 4-year course, 5-year course.
Yeah.
So I found that quite fascinating as I moved from year one into year two into all the dental sciences. But at the end of the day, whether you're a dental surgeon or a medical doctor, I feel that we're all part of the bigger healthcare system and we are equally privileged helping people and serving the communities.
So, I mean, there's like 30 people. Is that group very tight? So you know each other?
Inside out. Yeah, it's like a JC class.
Yeah, so small.
But now the intake has increased.
Okay, well, that's still quite small.
22 years ago, it was 30. Now it's 80. Every single year, 80 students pass out to become dentists in Singapore. Only one dental faculty from NUS. There's no other dental faculties.
Yeah.
But there are 3 medical faculty. I think there's one NUS medical fac, and then there's Duke NUS medical faculty, and then there's I think SMU or something like that, or NTU. So I think there are 3 medical schools, but there's only one dental school.
Wow. And I think what's interesting is that, as people go through that experience, one thing I notice is when I look at lawyers versus medical, a lot of them end up not liking law. And I feel like a lot of them drop out.
I know a few.
Bakeries, restaurants as well.
I know quite a few.
But I feel like the healthcare side, they don't really do that. At least to me, they don't.
That is an interesting observation. Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
The thing about dentistry is that you go to work at 8 or 9 a.m., see patients the entire day, and then end at 6:30. You're exhausted, but you can't take work home unless you set up a dental chair in your bedroom, advertise for patients to go to your house. You can't take work home. But as a lawyer, when you finish in the office, you could actually continue with whatever you need to do on the computer, reading, doing research. And that's why a lot of lawyers get burnt out.
I think it's understandable. They work like crazy as well, just like doctors, but I think that's a fair point. Being around the clock, work your weekends, crazy.
But having said that, there are some dental practices that I know of, especially in the HDB areas, that work 3 shifts a day, one morning shift, one afternoon shift, and then one night shift. Some dental practices can even open up till 11 p.m. at night, but I don't do that, you know.
So I think it's starting to talk a little bit about what was it like to be a dentist, right? And you graduated with a class of 30 and then you were a junior dentist. Could you walk me through what was it like to be a junior dentist?
So, after graduating from NUS Dentistry, we had to serve compulsory government bond for 4 years.
Right.
So, we didn't really have to send our CVs anywhere. It was understood that upon graduation, we would work for the government. We would be civil servants for 4 years, serving in healthcare. I was seconded to the armed forces where I worked as a young dentist and began to chalk up some experience. Army boys need to have their wisdom teeth removed and also need to have a medical and dental clearance before going for a course. If you get selected to go for OCS or whatever, you need to have medical dental clearance. I served that rotation for about 2 years, and then I was taken out of that role and seconded to the National Dental Center in SGH and then the Health Promotion Board, and that's where I ended my duty. I quickly made the decision to move on to private practice after that.
Interesting. I always remember national service. Some people were like, our strategy is to remove wisdom teeth one at a time. It's the medical leave. I was like, this is the most crazy thing I've heard, to do it one at a time. I think, but some people did do it two at a time, one side and one side. If you actually saw a lot, how would you characterize that difference for folks?
I feel that private practice 20 years ago compared to public practice 20 years ago looks very different now. The public hospitals and the public dental clinics, when compared to private clinics, are getting better and better in terms of their service quality, their technology, their overall customer experience. It used to be that if you go to the public hospitals or the public dentists, it's because you couldn't afford to go to the private ones. You had no choice because you had to go to the public ones for subsidized treatment. And then you would have to bear with long waiting times, substandard service quality, and maybe not the most cutting edge tech. But nowadays, dental hospitals, dental clinics, and basically the public sector rising up. You can see the hospitals newly renovated. They've got fancy machines and toys, especially the teaching hospitals. It's comparable to the private sector. The only downside is that the public sector still has a bit of a wait. You still need to get a queue number, and if you want subsidized rates, you need to get a referral letter from a polyclinic, and then you can't really choose which dentist you want. The public sector has its own quirks that some people might not like, but on a whole, I think the public sector is coming up and competing very well with the private sector.
You mentioned that technology is one of those differentiators between public and private. How have you seen the evolution of technology, primarily in the private side?
I think the key advantage that the private side has over the public is that we can make really quick decisions about acquisitions of technology. You can imagine in a big public hospital, if you want to buy a piece of tech, it goes through many layers of red tape. You've got to write a white paper for management approval and prove that this latest piece of tech would have a certain ROI, XY dollars would come back. But in private, if we want a piece of tech, we just get it. So that's the big advantage that the private sector has. We get access to all these fancy toys, and nowadays it's all about AI and even robotics and latest gadgets that help to execute treatment with less pain, with higher efficiency, with less downtime, with less inconvenience. It's been fantastic. Yeah.
And I think as a patient or user of those services, I've definitely seen that change, right? Just last year, I saw a 3D scan on my mouth, which I'd never seen before, which was kind of freaky because, when you rotate on the screen, there's your teeth, it's just like a embodied set of teeth rotating around.
Sure.
But definitely seeing that technology piece. What would you say are the waves of technology that have been the most important or critical in changing how the industry has been?
I'm fortunate to practice in the heart of Orchard Road. The clients I attract are fairly discerning and don't mind investing in their oral health and in seeing a dentist that's progressive and technology driven. Therefore, I can afford to tinker with the latest AI solutions because some of them don't come cheap. Coming back to your question, I think AI is impacting how dentists practice in ways I couldn't have imagined. We can use AI now to design teeth. For example, if you got involved in a very bad road traffic accident and you fractured or smashed your teeth, And if you had an old picture of yourself prior to the accident, smiling, I could take that and feed it into the AI, and the AI would redesign exactly the same kind of teeth to reconstruct all of your broken teeth to make you look exactly like what you looked like before the accident, which is simply amazing, isn't
I
it?
didn't know that was possible until you just told me.
Yeah, so it's all about AI design, computer aided design driven by AI. And then, of course, the dentist or the dental technician has the right to manually override and tweak whatever the AI suggests. The AI is being trained with thousands and millions of pictures of teeth so that they can suggest a design of teeth that would most likely be suitable for your mouth and face. That's how AI is impacting design. A large part of what I do is designing. A lot of my patients have severely worn down, broken or missing teeth and just have to reconstruct. So the reconstruction process always starts with design first before you actually execute. So that's how AI is impacting my field. What's even more exciting, and I'm just so excited to tell you about this, is that I'm currently involved in an AI project that has the attention of the government, of the Agency for Integrated Care. It's caught the attention of the National Dental Centre of Singapore. It's caught the attention of the Faculty of Dentistry, NUS. Caught the attention of Health Minister Ong. It's basically an AI that we could potentially deploy on a public health project, starting with a pilot targeting the elderly living in nursing homes, in active aging centers, as well as in a new HDB project called the Assisted Living Apartments. Have you heard of those? It's a HDB project where they build blocks of flats, and these flats are called assisted living apartments, where the elderly go to live out the rest of their days. So for these group of elderly, we all know Singapore's headed to a super age society by 2030. We have a low fertility, low birth rate problem. By 2030, there's going to be 1.2 million people in Singapore that's aged 65 and above. So for these group of people, the government has launched initiatives like you may have heard, Healthier, and they've got in-person functional health screening. Anyone above 65 that visits an active aging center will get their eyesight, hearing, and oral health checked. So we are trying to deploy AI-driven oral health screening tool at old age establishments. We can train staff or nurses to use the handphone to take pictures of teeth and gums. Those pictures are then submitted to an online AI platform. The AI platform analyzes the pictures and gives an oral health wellness score. The AI suggests certain observations that might trigger you to visit a dentist. For example, swollen gums, a black spot on your tooth that could be initial decay, missing teeth that could result in other teeth moving, teeth that are chipped, fractured, or broken. The AI picks up all of these things and gives you a score. And if you are considered medium or high risk, it then triggers you to see a dentist for early treatment, early diagnosis, and then that could in turn lead to prevention of a more serious oral health condition, which could be more costly and more painful to deal with down the road. I think MOH is trying to push this campaign of prevention. Their mantra is prevention of chronic disease, hypertension, diabetes, anything chronic that saves on the healthcare expenditure later on. It relieves the load on the public healthcare sector if more people prevent disease from setting in versus you live your life with no mindset of prevention and then you suddenly get hit with a very bad disease. You have no choice but to undergo expensive treatment and then you clog up the public health system. It's the same for oral health diseases. The ministry is trying to promote prevention of chronic healthcare diseases, but that starts with early screening, leading to early detection and early intervention at the dental office. But now the screening can be done with the power of just your handphone that's driven by AI. And you don't have to see a dentist to get your teeth screened anymore.
Yeah, I think it's really cool. The reality is that AI is making so many jobs efficient. I don't think for the lawyers, AI is obviously scary because it
Oh
will
my time.
replace a lot of the job.
So many of my lawyer friends I'm very worried.
Of course, because they can just spit out all the documents and be so precise. But I don't think it will ever replace dentistry. AI is needed to help make it more efficient, but it's not going to change the fundamental requirement that somebody has to look at your teeth in person.
Someone has to look at the teeth in person. Someone has to pick up a handpiece and start drilling your teeth.
gonna have
But
to change
AI
lives.
is just going to be enabler.
Yeah.
It will enable, patients who don't have easy access to the dentist have a quick and easy oral health screen
Right.
to understand or have an idea of what their current state of oral health is. It's just kind of like a blood test. But nowadays, you have no choice. You have to go to a clinic, get your blood drawn, and then you have a health report.
Right.
Imagine in the future, you don't have to have your blood drawn. You have an AI tool that shines light into your eye blood vessels, and then, I don't know.
It's like Star Trek already. Yeah.
You don't have to see a dentist. You can, from the comfort of your own home, take a couple of pictures of your teeth within certain parameters. It can't be blur photos, and you submit it to AI, and the AI will analyze it. Verified by a remote dentist, you get an oral health report, and if something is serious, it triggers you to go and see a nearby dentist.
I think what's interesting is that you know so much about this, and it just goes to show how entrepreneurial you are, right? What's been interesting is that you also built out the elite dental group as well, and you've been an entrepreneur within the dental space as well. Could you share a little bit more about the entrepreneurial journey?
So, as I mentioned earlier, I've been a dentist for 22 years, but an entrepreneur only for the past 10. Prior to that, I was working as an associate dentist in a really nice private practice in Ngee Ann City. Really enjoyed my time there. I learned from whom I thought were the best dentists in private practice at that time. But an opportunity arose for me to acquire a dental practice from a very senior dentist who was thinking of retiring. So took a deep breath and borrowed some money from my parents, and I decided it's now or never, and I decided to acquire this practice from this senior dentist who was retiring. I acquired her business, her database, her machines, tools, and equipment, and I retained her staff. My life hasn't been the same since.
How has your life changed? Because, before that you were an employee learning, and now you're the boss.
I've had good days and bad days,
What are the good days? What are the bad days from your perspective now that you are running your own business?
The good days, thankfully, are more than the bad days. The good days typically look like my dental chairs filled with happy patients and my associate dentists feeling fulfilled and happy with the kind of dentistry and the service that they're providing. A good day could look like my team members, my team of nurses, front office executives humming along in harmony with little misunderstanding and quarrel, and that's a good day. Bad days started to become more frequent when COVID hit. A bad day turned into a bad week, turned into a bad month, turned to a bad year, Jeremy.
Pandemic's a tough time.
I think that I don't speak just for myself, but for many other businesses as well.
How specifically did the pandemic be tough dentistry practice?
Well, I think dentistry is still very much considered a primary healthcare need. But when COVID hit, the thing that frustrated all of us was, although we were allowed to remain open, we were only allowed to see patients who were in need of emergency dental treatment. Like if you were suffering from acute toothache, then we were allowed to see you. So there were some patients who tried to game the system. They would call in and say that they've got a ravaging toothache, they can't eat, they can't sleep, but then when they show up in the clinic, all they need is a clean. Because they just really wanted to get their treatment done. They had to lie and say they were having a toothache when they weren't actually, just in order to get into the dental office. Another thing that hit me hard was I lost all of my overseas patients in the Orchard Road belt, Mount Elizabeth, Orchard, where I am in Somerset and Ngee Ann City. All of us in Orchard Road used to enjoy seeing a lot of dental tourists. We used to work with a lot of medical and dental concierge companies who would arrange for patients from nearby countries like Indonesia to come to Singapore. You spend a week here. On Monday, you get your hair done. On Tuesday, you get a full body checkup, blood test and all that done. Wednesday, you get your teeth done. Thursday, you see the cardiologist if you need to. Friday, you go to the casino and Saturday shopping, dinners on every night, and then you fly back. It's like a packet. And all of that kind of dried up. And now that we are 4 years out of the pandemic, those numbers haven't come back in a big way.
So they've stayed
In
in their home
countries.
countries and with their own dental practices and healthcare.
Doctors and dentists in their own countries were forced to innovate, rise up to the occasion. They were wary of losing patients to Singapore, the go-to medical hub of Southeast Asia, right? I mean, if you are a famous doctor or dentist in Indonesia, you would be, feeling it, right? Oh, I'm losing my patients to Singapore. But then now we are losing patients to JB.
And soon we can take a train there.
It's the Hong Kong Shenzhen thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think what's interesting is that this is one challenge you had. Were there other challenges that you had, in your business, as an entrepreneurial person?
Generally, as a healthcare practitioner and practice owner, we are subjected to very strict publicity and advertising rules and regulations as meted out by MOH. So that has been an ongoing challenge for many years now. But thankfully, MOH has of late been progressive in their thinking and relaxed some of these rules and regulations. It's still a very challenging landscape compared to our neighbors. Malaysia, the rising economies like Vietnam, Philippines. If you're a dentist there, you could really aggressively think of creative marketing campaigns to improve your business. But here, it's still very much heavily restricted.
I understand that you went through a difficult business challenge through a joint venture. And
Yes,
it's also in
yeah.
the public news as well. Could you share a little bit more about that experience?
So, wow. I mean, I could go on and on, Jeremy. This could be like a therapy session. I still have a bit of PTSD on it. But okay, I'll just share for the benefit of the viewers. In 2019, I was approached by two dear friends of mine who were ex-JPM bankers who had left the bank to purchase a chain of medical aesthetic clinics called PPP at that time. Have you heard of the PPP chain of laser aesthetic clinics?
It wasn't in the market.
They had about 12 or 15 clinics around Singapore. The business model for those clinics was high volume, low fee laser skin aesthetic treatment. They were doing quite well. These two ex-partners of mine were not medical doctors or dentists, just business people. They saw an opportunity in healthcare and they decided to purchase this group of clinics. To their credit, they improved the business by leaps and bounds, and that attracted, many other investors who were willing to pump in more money to invest in growing this group. They received investment money from family offices, very wealthy private individuals, institutional money, and banks. They were acquiring businesses. They were, at that point, they were acquiring a health screening business, and then there was talks about acquiring a hair care business. There was talks to acquire a medical lab. There were GP practices. This is a classic healthcare play. Where the game is they grow organically and then they acquire and grow bigger and bigger, and then there's a liquidity event, right? Yeah, usually it's a trade sale or IPO, which is what they were planning. You would probably know all this better than me. But they called me one day and said, "Hey, Gerald, we're missing something very important. We're missing dental." And, we sat down and we had a couple of dinners, and they managed to convince me that if I were to start a joint venture with them and grow the dental subsidiary of this healthcare conglomerate they were trying to build, it would be value creating, value adding, and very meaningful. And there would be something at the end of the rainbow for all of us. This is not new. I think Fullerton has been trying to do this, and Raffles and whatnot. You've heard this in the marketplace time and time again. So I said, okay. I agreed to be a joint venture partner, and I had sight of the bank account, and we were really healthy. I had the budget to acquire top-line revenue from practices in Singapore and around the region. So I went around signing NDAs, doing operational due diligence, trying to sell the story, basically. This went on for about a year, and my discussions with acquisition targets were in the late stage towards a draft MOU or a draft sales and purchase agreement. I read a newspaper report that my partners were being charged for forgery, a police report has been made, and they were charged for forgery and embezzlement. Soon after, my phone started ringing and my other partners started calling me, asking what's going on. I tried calling my partners and their phones were not even switched on. I panicked. It was eventually discovered that my ex-partners had forged financial documents. Not only did they forge the financial documents, but they also forged Ernst & Young chief auditor's signature on those financial documents. With those forged financial documents, they went to 6 different banks to borrow money from each bank, plus all the money that was injected by all these investors from family offices and whatnot. They emptied the bank account and fled to China, abandoning their wives, partners, children, and families, and leaving us all high and dry, leaving the businesses, investors, and banks high and dry. You couldn't make this kind of thing up.
Oh my gosh, that sounds terrible.
I panicked and I called my lawyers, the same lawyers that helped me craft my own joint venture, agreement, term sheet and agreement with them to try to extricate me out of this joint venture. I managed to exercise my right to unwind from this joint venture agreement because my lawyers had very cleverly included unwinding clause.
A termination.
Like a termination or unwinding clause with potential triggers for this unwinding. And one of the triggers was either a police investigation or some allegation of dishonesty or fraud.
Right.
And I have the right to unwind. And I managed to do that.
Oh my gosh, that sounds crazy.
Yeah.
What was it like when you saw was it a newspaper when you read it, or was it a phone?
I just felt gutted. These 2 partners of mine, we were childhood friends. They were very successful bankers. One of them is sadly even Harvard alum.
That's terrible.
I mean, I could name names, but this is all public knowledge. Their names were all published in the Straits Times. So I will leave it to you to find out.
Still fugitives?
So one of them has been charged. He pleaded guilty. So he's now serving a 15-year prison sentence. Because they arrested him in China. He was flown back and he's now serving his sentence. The other partner swears he had nothing to do with it. He's now a declared bankrupt. From what I have heard, there's a prosecution team set up to build a case to set up charges against him. Yeah.
I mean, if they both ran to China together, how do you not know what you're doing? So kind of crazy.
One of them ran to China, the other one didn't.
One ran to China. Okay, so I guess that's...
The second one's passport was impounded before he could.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Is there any advice you would give to folks to avoid a situation?
That's an interesting question. Because of this episode, I decided to enroll in HBS to present this case study as a thesis, something I could discuss with my business professors, and I've learned so much from them. The advice that I would give is that when you enter into a joint venture partnership, no amount of cleverness in a term sheet, no amount of detail in an agreement can protect you completely from a partner who is intending to cheat or be dishonest. If you encounter a partner that's dishonest, it's very hard to protect yourself completely from that. I've heard of family businesses where brothers and relatives are less than honest with one another. Friends or associates that you don't really know well. And you think that you're completely protected by a very clever, detailed shareholders agreement written by Singapore's top lawyer. All that is helpful, don't get me wrong. But if someone really wants to be dishonest towards you, there's very little that you can do. And then if someone actually does behave in this way towards you, and then you fall back to your shareholders agreement or whatever term sheet you sign, and then that's when you start fighting and arguing and going to court, trying to prove your point and having people listen to your story, and then that drains your life energy, right?
That'll be a bad day.
It could be months, if not years, before you get your money back or get your shares back or extricate yourself from the joint venture. And then even though in principle you think you might be morally right, but at the end of the ordeal you'll be just so exhausted and you might be even poorer from all of those legal fees that you had to fork out, even if you had the best shareholders agreement.
That's good advice.
That's something that is business entrepreneurship is not for everyone.
And on that note, my last question for you is, could you share a personal story about a time you've been brave?
Wow, coming back to what I said earlier, having that bravery to take myself out of my comfort zone from being an associate dentist to becoming a practice owner, entrepreneur, required a lot of bravery on my part. I was stepping out of my sphere of competency. As a dental professional in university, we were taught to be very good at what we do, but we were taught very little about leadership, entrepreneurship, finance, commanding respect from a team, marketing and personal branding, and all those things necessary for an entrepreneur to succeed.
Right.
I had to really get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Yeah, it was very intentional for me to be brave and to surround myself with people who could help along this journey, to impart some of their wisdom and experience. But still, mistakes still need to be made for you to learn.
Thank you so much for sharing your journey. I'd love to summarize the 3 big takeaways. First of all, thanks for sharing about your early student journey as a dental student. I think a lot of people don't know what's it like to be a dental student. Secondly, thanks for sharing about technology and dentistry, the public versus the private sectors. I think it was a very wonderful landscape portrayal about what's going on in the space. And lastly, thanks so much for sharing about your own entrepreneurial adventure as a founder, but also some of the misadventures that you had with bad faith business partners. And I think that's such a great encapsulation of both good things to learn as well as good advice to follow to avoid bad situations. On that note, thank you so much for sharing.
Welcome, Gerald.
Thank you for listening to Brave. If you enjoyed this episode, please share the podcast with your friends and colleagues. We would also appreciate you leaving a rating or review. Head over to www.bravesea.com for member content, resources, and community. Stay well and stay brave.